U.S. Bishops' Conference. The focus turns to the Eucharist and its importance in the life of the Church. Holy Communion. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone shares his take on the debate. Traveling across the country. President Joe Biden pushes new infrastructure for electric vehicles. And border crisis. Lawmakers react to the growing pressure facing agents on the southern border. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Elizabeth of Hungary. I'm Tracy Sabol. An overwhelming yes vote at the U.S. Bishops' annual meeting. The bishops voted on a number of action items today, but the one that got the most attention was focused on the Eucharist in the life of the Church. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the bishops' meeting in Baltimore.
Tracy, today 95% of the U.S. bishops gathered here approved a statement on the Eucharist, and clearly there has been evolution on this matter, as not so long ago there was pushback about even creating a document. U.S. bishops unify over a statement focused on giving clear teaching about the Eucharist. At their annual meeting in Baltimore, the body of bishops overwhelmingly approved a statement called The Mystery of the Eucharist in the Life of the Church. We spoke with bishops who told us about the importance of clarifying church teaching.
We need to listen to the Word of God and to venerate Him present in the bread and the wine.
It's about coming closer to Christ and helping our people come to appreciate the great gift that the Eucharist is.
During their June meeting, about 75% of the bishops supported an initial drafting of the teaching document on the Eucharist, but 55 bishops voted against it, some expressing concerns it would attempt to deny some public officials communion. Today, only 8 bishops voted against approving the document.
The document is not about politics, it's about the Eucharist.
Before the final vote today, various amendments to the document were proposed. Earlier this week, Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, told us he wanted to emphasize the need to approach the Eucharist with a repentant heart and confession. He said that applies not just to public officials, but all people who may oppose church teaching.
Whatever walk of life, if you are adamantly opposing what the church teaches, that has to be addressed before you approach the Eucharistic altar.
Today, the bishops took up a number of other action items, approving the USCCB 2022 budget and voting to update the conference's socially responsible investment guidelines. The bishops also authorized a review of their charter for the protection of children and young people, a document focused on fighting clergy sex abuse.
We would expect that the review would take into consideration learnings from the McCarrick Report, other current events in the life of the Church, and societal trends that present challenges for maintaining a safe environment.
The bishops also approved a National Eucharistic Congress today. The big event is scheduled for 2024 in Indianapolis. It's all part of the bishops' effort to create a revival centered around the Eucharist. In Baltimore, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining me now to discuss this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone from the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Your Excellency, welcome back. So great to see you. First off, I'd like to get your reaction to the vote, and also could you give us some insight into those discussions that you all have had in regards to the document?
Well, the document has matured over time. It was somewhat restructured and someone amplified. The document we were presented to vote on for this meeting was only minor, really, changes were made to it. There was a real sense of consensus and cohesion around this document. One point that was brought up was giving more emphasis to the connection between the Eucharist and the poor and all kind of vulnerable, marginalized people. This, of course, is very ancient in our tradition. All the saints, St. John Chrysostom in particular, has preached very forcefully about that. The Eucharist requires us to care for the poor. Up to Pope Benedict XVI in his encyclical Sacramentum Caritatis, he emphasizes this sacrament of love of charity calls us to care for the poor. So that was given more emphasis, and then there were a few other little sort of tweaks made here and there. But the document that the Doctrine Committee produced was accepted very robustly, very gratefully by all of the bishops. So to me, it demonstrates that the process works. The committee drafted an original document. They consulted the various pertinent other committees of the conference. All of the bishops had an opportunity to submit modifications in advance of this meeting. The document was somewhat restructured from the original one, and what ended up being produced is a very beautiful and I think well-balanced document that will be very valuable for our teaching about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and what it means to be properly disposed to receive Him in the Eucharist.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, how important do you think this is?
The importance is now to be determined. What is important is how this document is implemented in the diocese and around the country, and what is actually done with it. We're seeing this as sort of the doctrinal basis of the other Eucharistic project we have going on now, Eucharistic Revival. So this is a teaching document, so the doctrinal basis for this multi-year, 3-year process of celebrating the Eucharist and rekindling Eucharistic devotion and love at the diocesan parish level, culminating in a grand national event, a National Eucharistic Congress. So how important is it? Is to be determined, but I see it as having great potential as the doctrinal basis of this Eucharistic revival process and as a great resource for bishops in their diocese.
And I understand later today the bishops will also vote on if there should be a National Eucharistic Congress in 2024. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, we actually, miraculously enough, ended our morning agenda early, so we're able to move that up from the afternoon agenda to the morning. So we just ended our morning session with that agenda item. The idea is that we would begin on a diocesan level with Corpus Christi processions next year, July 19th of next year, and that would launch this Eucharistic revival process. And then we would have Eucharistic missionaries, preachers to preach in dioceses at diocesan convocations of priests, however bishops want to utilize them in their diocese. You can call upon them, they'll be all around the country. Then the parish celebration the following year, and then again culminating in this National Eucharistic Congress that will take place in Indianapolis, July 17th through the 21st in 2024.
And Your Excellency, before I let you go, curious your take on how things are going so far and also what you're looking forward to from the rest of the meeting.
I've been a bishop for 19 years now, and when I first became a bishop in 2002, the conference had recently begun a practice of a morning of prayer after the meeting. So the meeting of the full body of bishops goes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday morning, there would be an optional morning of prayer. This time, for the first time, we began the meeting with the morning of prayer Monday morning. And I was hoping we would be able to do this sometime, and we did. I think it made a big difference. It put a whole different tone to our meeting together. We also had perpetual adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, and bishops and staffs were able to sign up for times even all throughout the night. So I think the primacy of prayer, that being the focus of this meeting, has made a big difference, and I sense a great deal more of cohesion among the bishops throughout the country.
Well, Archbishop Cordelion, thank you so much for your time today, and God bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you. You too.
President Joe Biden flew to Detroit, Michigan today. That is where General Motors celebrated the grand opening of Factory Zero, which makes zero-emission electric vehicles. A new infrastructure deal provides billions of dollars to install EV chargers across the nation. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, critics say President Joe Biden should focus less on electricity right now and more on the soaring price of gasoline. That cross-country Thanksgiving road trip next week is going to cost a lot more money.
President Joe Biden left the White House this afternoon, headed to Detroit, Michigan. Another chance to try to convince skeptical Americans the freshly signed $1 trillion infrastructure law will be money well spent. Today's destination, Factory Zero, which helped open up today's financial markets. For years, the 4.1 million square foot plant built cars with internal combustion engines. Not anymore. Now it's Hummer electric vehicles. The new infrastructure law signed Monday is spending billions on the EV charging network. And if the proposed Build Back Better spending plan finds its way to the president's desk, buyers of electric vehicles could get a big tax credit. But Republicans are ripping the president, saying his energy policy is too focused on EV technology at a time when Americans are getting pummeled at the pumps and home heating costs are expected to be painful as well. Senator Mitch McConnell tweeting this rebuke: gas prices and heating costs are soaring. Families are suffering. The Democrats' answer: more borrowing, printing, and spending on anti-energy policies that would dump money into supply chains that China controls. Make working Americans pay extra to build back Beijing. Meanwhile, the White House COVID-19 response team warns Americans COVID-19 is here to stay.
So I don't think we're going to eliminate it completely. We want control. And I think the confusion is, at what level of control are you going to accept it?
Also tonight, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, says it will abide by a recent court ruling to stop implementing its controversial vaccine mandate. That mandate applies to companies with 100 or more employees. Opponents have blasted the mandate, calling it government overreach. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, as the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border continues, the Homeland Security Secretary faced a gauntlet of questions from lawmakers on the Senate Judiciary Committee. They demanded answers about the Biden administration's border strategy. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says that the U.S. immigration system is broken. But in one of the many heated exchanges, Republicans were quick to point out that the Biden administration's policy to pay migrants money is part of the problem.
The settlement payment of the federal tort claim charge arising from a family separation effected under the prior administration's zero tolerance policy would not be a pull factor. That is my testimony.
That is your understood. I think that's news, that you think that these payments to illegal immigrants would not be a pull factor, that paying them would not encourage more illegal immigration. That's news.
The latest number showed last month more than 164,000 people were arrested along the U.S.-Mexico border. That's a 127% increase from October of 2020, bringing the total to more than 1.7 million detentions this year.
We have Nigerian doctors and Swiss engineers that are following the rules to come into our country illegally, but the Department of Homeland Security will let any jackleg gangbanger jump the fence and come on in with no questions asked.
Florida Senator Rick Scott tells me covert migrant flights into the Sunshine State and elsewhere are perpetuating the crisis.
How is it fair to people that go through the process to make sure they do it legally, that you just can walk across the border and then they'll put you on a flight and send you all across the country?
Democrats argue real immigration reform must take place.
We have a responsibility to pass laws to make our immigration system work, and virtually everyone on both sides of the aisle agrees that our system is currently broken.
The U.S. bishops would like to see the creation of an earned legalization program that would allow foreign nationals of good moral character working in the U.S. to become legal citizens. Democrats have included immigration policies in the Build Back Better Act, but the Senate parliamentarian still has to decide if they can remain in the bill. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, Hot Topics. The co-founder of Real Clear Politics joins us to go beyond today's headlines. And putting your trust in God. Pope Francis offers a lesson from St. Joseph. Republicans in the House Judiciary Committee say the FBI is targeting parents who speak out against school boards. Lawmakers released an email yesterday from an apparent whistleblower, which alleges the Department of Justice is using counterterrorism measures against parents, contradicting last month's testimony by Attorney General Merrick Garland. And joining us now to talk more about this is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom, welcome back. Always great to see you. So, Tom, what more do we know about these alleged counterterrorism tactics against parents and A.G. Garland's involvement?
Well, as you mentioned, the House Judiciary released this email from a whistleblower. This email went out the day before Merrick Garland testified, so October 20th, and it was from the counterterrorism, on behalf of the Counterterrorism and Criminal Division of the FBI, and which is something that Merrick Garland testified that no counterterrorism resources or tools were being used to support the order he gave to the FBI to track threats against school board members and the like. And so it appears as if he either wasn't aware of what was going on, or he was, and he misled Congress. And so we'll get to the bottom of this. But basically what it comes down to is this order went out to the FBI. They were using what's called a threat tag to try and coordinate information across the country, across all these different jurisdictions about it, to get a scope of the threat. But again, it did include the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI, which is something he said they were not doing.
Yeah, Tom, it sounds all kind of sinister, but what do you think this all signals, and how concerned should we all be?
Well, I think it signals the fact that the FBI was, in fact, that directive that went out, even though Merrick Garland tried to play it down in his testimony, I think it actually probably was more invasive than it was initially portrayed to be. Now, remember, this took place in coordination with an interest group that pressed with the White House that gave this directive to the FBI, or asked them to take it under advisement. They turned around and issued this order. And so it looks like this might have been more coordinated of an effort than was first reported.
Yeah, and hopefully we will get to the bottom of all that. I'm going to switch gears here slightly. Earlier, we reported that OSHA will stop enforcing the Biden administration's vaccine mandates, at least for now. Tom, how significant do you think this is, and how do you think this will all play out?
So I do think this is significant. Obviously, January 4th is when the order was supposed to go into effect, but we had about 36 court cases that were spread out over all 12 jurisdictions. Those have been consolidated in the Sixth Circuit now, and they upheld the stay that was issued by the Fifth Circuit. So I think this is a real blow to the vaccine mandate from a legal perspective. We've already seen pushback across the country by various employers and employees and members of police and firefighters and the like. And so this just adds to the woes of the Biden administration's effort to push through this vaccine mandate. OSHA says they're confident it'll be upheld, but it looks like the mandate might be headed for the dustbin.
Yeah, I want to turn now to Capitol Hill. There have been a number of legislators announcing their retirements recently, including Democrat Senator Patrick Leahy, Vermont and California Representative Jackie Speier just this week. Additionally, a Democratic state rep in Texas announced that he's switching parties and becoming a Republican. What's your take on this? What do you think is happening here?
Well, typically, we do see, particularly when the party in power is headed toward their first midterm, we see a wave of retirements when folks who've been in Congress either for a long time or who are in marginal districts can sort of read the writing on the wall. And that's what we're seeing right now from Democrats. I think the more interesting thing is the one that you mentioned, and this went largely unreported by a lot of folks, is that we had a Democrat in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley switch parties. This is a place where President Trump won counties that hadn't been won since the Reconstruction era, that have long voted Democratic, and he scored big gains with Hispanic voters in particular down in the border region. And that, to me, is real trouble for the Democrats. And I think they need to pay real attention to that, because without winning, a large share of the Hispanic vote, they will be in real trouble in all sorts of places around the country next November.
And Tom, before we wrap up, we don't have a whole lot of time. I want to ask you this and get your take on it. There's reports that there's tension in the White House between President Biden and his people and Vice President Harris and her camp, although Press Secretary Jen Psaki kind of refuted those claims. Do you think there's anything more to this, or do you think maybe it's just rumors and someone trying to stir the pot, so to speak?
Well, look, this team has been in office less than a year, and already the story that came out by CNN earlier this week was based on interviews with a bunch of folks in Kamala Harris's camp, and also interviews from folks inside Biden's camp in the White House. And so this is clearly not being conjured up out of thin air. There's real dysfunction. There's real tension between the president and the vice president, and how they view each other and how they view the future of the party, who's going to lead the party. And so this is again, unprecedented to happen this early, to see people jockeying for position for the next presidential race and who might eventually be the leader of the party. So again, not a good sign for Democrats that this is taking place this early in the administration.
Okay, got to leave it right there. Tom, thank you so much. Always great to get your analysis.
Thanks.
Up next, the significance of Red Week, how it draws attention to Christian persecution. And coming to theaters, how The Chosen portrays the birth of Christ. Well, today is the start of a week-long initiative to raise awareness of Christian persecution around the world. Red Week began several years ago and was created by Aid to the Church in Need. It draws attention by projecting red lights onto hundreds of cathedrals, churches, and monuments. Aid to the Church in Need is an international Catholic organization offering financial support for projects worldwide. Joining us now from Germany is Mark von Riedman, Director of Public Affairs and Religious Freedom for Aid to the Church in Need International. Mark, great to see you. Thanks so much for your time today. Can you tell us a little bit more about Red Week, how it started, and what sort of things are being done?
Sure, Tracy. Thank you for having me, first of all. The Red Week initiative started in 2015, actually, by a priest, an Iraqi priest, who came to Brazil and was telling his own experiences. He was himself captured and tortured by Islamist extremists. And he was telling of the suffering of the Iraqi people. And the Brazilian director of Aid to the Church in Need was so impressed by the story that he said, look, we have to do something. So he organized with the civil authorities to light the Christ the Redeemer statue, you know, this enormous statue that overlooks Rio, red. And this had such a phenomenal repercussion in favor of the story of the suffering Christians.
Mark, what are some of the other notable churches and monuments that are going to turn red this week?
So we are, in fact, it's a record, Tracy. We have 21 countries participating. Again, the UK with the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Cathedral. We have Christ the Redeemer statue being lit in Lisbon, not in Rio, but rather in Lisbon. Thousands of churches in the Philippines, in more than 100 churches in Austria, 3 cathedrals in Australia. And what's interesting there is that young people are going under the motto of going to Mass for those who can't. So for those suffering Christians who cannot go to Mass. A cathedral and basilica in Canada. And for the first time, which I find very touching, is the cathedral, the Maronite Cathedral in Aleppo, in Syria. So for the first time in a country of persecution, we will be lighting, together with the Maronite authorities, the church leaders there, the cathedral red in memory of the suffering Christians in Syria, but also with the sense that the Syrian population, the Syrian Christians, can also pray for the universal church and those suffering Christians all around the world.
And Mark, not a whole lot of time left, maybe about a minute or so, but wondering if you can quickly give us an update on the current situation for those Christians persecuted around the world.
Sure. There are, well, in very short, it's getting worse, and it's getting a lot worse. Violations of religious freedom against Christians and other faith groups is increasing, regrettably. The ACN report that we launched in April of this year reveals that 26 countries are in the red category, which we classify as persecution. And this is home to 3.9 billion people, so almost half of the world's population. This classification of red includes 12 countries, including 2 countries which are undergoing investigation for genocide. That would be China against the Uyghur Muslims and Myanmar against the Rohingyas. And then 36 countries which we have classified as orange, which is discrimination, is in turn home to about 1.2 billion people. So where religious freedom is neither enjoyed nor constitutionally guaranteed. And there are 3 main factors driving religious persecution today. Authoritarian governments, North Korea, China, Eritrea, for example, Islamist extremism, we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, and finally, what we call ethno-religious supremacy, that is countries like India, where the Hindu majority are being manipulated by the political leaders to consider that India should be for Indians and Indians should be Hindu.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on, speaking with us, and thank you for the work that you do. Mark von Riedman, Aid to the Church in Need International, thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy. It was great to be with you.
Pope Francis reminds the faithful of the strong example for the life set by St. Joseph.
Il Signore continua a manifestarsi nelle periferie.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father said St. Joseph teaches us to notice the people that the world overlooks. The carpenter from Nazareth is also a model of someone who puts their trust completely in God. The Church's Year of St. Joseph draws to a close next month. And finally, tonight, a bonus episode of an online series depicting the life of Christ is headed to theaters. The episode of The Chosen will be on the big screen December 1st. The special will tell the story of the birth of Christ through the eyes of Mary and Joseph. Christmas with The Chosen, The Messengers, will be in theaters for around 2 weeks before becoming available online. The Chosen stars Jonathan Rumi, a Catholic, as Christ, and since its release in 2019, it has received 300 million views in more than 190 countries. Amazing. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.